Welcome in AWA Unleashed. We are the #1 self-proclaimed preeminent podcast dedicated to telling the stories and reliving the great days, the gravy days with the biscuit wheels of the American Wrestling Association. We've got a lot of fun. And as you can tell by the background, I've gone to the upstairs office area, and we're doing it a little bit later at night because I feel like guys, this is going to be one of those. I don't want to say AWA Unleashed after dark, but I can tell you who's sitting back in the I don't want to say gorilla position, who's waiting backstage to come out. Guys, I got to admit, man, I've been looking forward to this. Like, I'm juiced up beyond belief for what we've got coming up.
Heish, shish, heish, heish, heish.
Yeah, this is going to be a good one, no question about it. And I was going to ask you about that, Chris. The decor, you pulled the shade, which I know at your place is a must because of the stuff that goes on there pretty much on a continuing basis.
What happens in Plymouth stays in Plymouth, okay?
Well, okay. I got a little concerned there. I thought maybe, you had been banished to another location, parts unknown. But
yeah, known as our office. Yes.
Yeah,
I've been
this
banished.
Is going to be a good one. We've been looking forward to this, and yeah, hang on, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be a good ride.
Yep. So that being said, let's go ahead and thank our sponsors. You can see Soda Stick right there. They do a great job with all of our merchandise. I'm going to go ahead and put the scroll up there. If you want an AWA gimmick, AWA Unleashed gimmick with the gimmick, because people like the gimmick, Mick, you can go to sodastickco.com/collections AWA Unleashed. Get a hoodie, get your name on it, rep the podcast, rep the AWA Unleashed Army, whatever you want to call us. But we're having a blast with that. Also, as you can tell, I'm going to put it up there on the screen, 7th Avenue Pizza as well. Great frozen pizza, you guys. It doesn't taste frozen. Their new breakfast pizza, I had it this morning. It is the cat's meow, as the kids would say. Okay, are we ready to go? We're going to do 2 parts here because we can't fit this into just one show, right? I feel like we had to do 2 parts, guys. I mean, fair to say, like, if we would have done one hour, I would have been pissed because I would have felt that we would have left a lot of stuff on the table.
Agreed.
No question about it. And with the size of this guy, you need 2 shows. You can't get all of this man in one podcast, even visually. So with that, we are going to introduce a good friend of ours. Look at him. The guy has not aged a bit in the last 30 years. He is everybody's favorite Barbarian and Berzerker and Yukon. Our buddy John Nord. John, how are you, pal?
Hey, you guys. Thanks for having me, man. AWA, gosh, brings a tear to my heart. You know what? Or tear to my eye. I'm feeling very, very excited about this, but I'll tell you what. You always start thinking about saying something clever and all that, and I'm gonna, but and you guys are gonna, but I'm also feeling very grateful. This is really cool stuff.
Well, we're delighted to have you here. You don't have to worry about us saying anything clever, John. We'll leave that up to you. Okay. It ain't going to come from us.
No.
So, again, legendary as far as I'm concerned in pro wrestling, and one of my absolute favorite people, not only in the business but on the planet, as far as I'm concerned, John Nord. So, Chris, I know you wanted to kick it off. You've been chopping at the bit, buddy, so have at it.
Oh, man. And again, I am just thrilled beyond belief for this. When I met him for the last, summer, within the first 2 seconds, I mean, I literally was just, busting up because it was just, one liner after one-liner after one-liner, and I couldn't catch my breath because I just kept laughing so hard. And then it's he tells us he's a fan of the show, and then when we get on, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Of course we'll get him on. So yeah, let me.
Thanks a lot, you guys. That was, and I know right where it was too. It was in the elevator. Then we went over to the thing, and we were laughing. That was kind of a story I can't quite tell there. Yeah. So you guys know what I mean. But
don't worry about us,
Chris.
God. We don't.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and kick it off, John, by talking about maybe what is considered the mecca of pro wrestling talent here in the Twin Cities, and that's Robbinsdale. I mean, you talk about the legendary names that came out of Robbinsdale High School. What sports did you participate in? And I mean, who were some of your fellow students?
Well, I was in football and wrestling. I grew up my whole life wanting to be a pro football player, but as Kurt Hennig used to say, if you untie your knees, you'd be a pretty good athlete, Nord. But the list goes on and on. But I was an average wrestler, heavyweight. I was the heavyweight that could beat the football. I mean, I was a football player that could beat the heavyweight. So they were always recruiting me, but mainly football. And of course, we had Barry Darsow, Kurt Hennig, Rick Rude. Zenk was a soccer player that would trip me in the hallway, and then I'd have to get my hands on that little gun and squeeze them. And of course, over to the side was Scott Norton and Mike Hagstrand over at Henry. And they would cruise by and at the Robbinsdale McDonald's, and Hennig would give them a little punch through the window of their car. And of course, they thought it was me and then came looking for me. Thanks, Kurt.
No, Kurt would never.
No, he's not cut that way. One thing we'd always say in the later years, Kurt, remember the country western song where George Jones would go, "Aw, we all knew you would."
Oh.
And Kurt Hennig was saying that all the time, like, "Hey, Kurt, I just got my 4th DUI," and you go, "Aw, we all knew you would."
No wonder it's the mecca of pro wrestling.
We're out of control.
Well, there's one. Didn't Medusa go to Robbinsdale as well?
Yeah, she did. And I think she was about 5 years younger than me. And I just don't remember her, that well at them ages. But what I do remember is growing up in neighborhoods with all the guys I just mentioned. I mean, it really was incredible, but it was also so much fun that a guy had no right to have that much fun. It really was.
You gave the list of those guys, and if you're any kind of a wrestling fan who has followed the business for the last 25 or 30 years, and you hear that list, you think, what, all from the same high school? And then you go back even further than that, when you had Larry Hennig and Verne Gagne coming out of there.
Yeah.
I mean, that is one hell of an alumni from Robbinsdale.
Yeah, thanks, Mick. But, the thing is, if you got to really know Robbinsdale, you got to kind of know that in 1943, Verne Gagne graduated. 2-time national champ and all that. And before him was a guy named Butch Levy. And you guys know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely, sure.
Anyways, Verne was downtown Robbinsdale. My father-in-law, the gal I was married to for 25 years, built the Palace Pizza. They built, and Verne and him worked at the restaurant. And Verne actually came from a broken family. Most people don't know a little bit. And he stayed with my in-laws. When Verne Gagne graduated in 1943 with my father-in-law, they graduated together, and he actually stayed with my father-in-law's parents. And there's a place downtown Robbinsdale called the Robin Hotel, and it's still standing. It's made of brick. It ain't going nowhere, I don't think. And that's where Verne was living for a while.
Is that on Broadway there?
Yeah, it's right across from the fire department.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so that's where you start, and the water tower. And then, of course, we always said it was something in the water, Of
course.
So, but that's where you really can start. And then Larry graduated 55, I think. And it was just fun. I mean, Larry Hennig, as Kurt's dad, we'd walk by and go, "Hey, Axe," and we'd best pulls our arm. And I remember I was told Kurt that the Axe's eyes were so close together, I thought it was one eye. Kurt would just be busting up. He loved it.
Was that the Larry the Cyclops, Hennig?
God bless his heart, but he, and then Kurt got his eyes, of course, so I wrote him, but
John, that is such a great legacy, and I love Robbinsdale. The only time that I go to Robbinsdale these days is to go to Pawn America, see if I can get anything from my old Pounce AWA patrons.
I've been there.
Oh, yeah.
They insult you too. Oh, they insult you. Oh, I'm like, $5? I came in here sitting. I'll be out in a half hour with a C note, guys. Done deal.
Oh, it's great.
We've all done that walk of shame with that $5 bill. The water can get real choppy, you guys.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and that guy, of course, the owner of Pawn America. You got, the guy that used to do the commercials. Remember him?
Yeah, sure.
Do them?
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyways, back to Robbinsdale, you guys. It was really fun, and I mean, for real. And those guys, a guy like Barry Darsow, who, Barry was never figured as a tough guy, but he was younger. But I'll tell you what, he was the most athletic guy. Babe Ruth, Darsow was plugging him 50 feet longer than everybody else in baseball.
Wow.
So Barry was super athletic, and he was a really good football player. And the list goes on. And before I quit talking here for a sec, Curt Hennig, Curt played at Normandale for a year.
Yeah.
And he played with a guy named Tim Moyer. His dad was a coach, but I went and watched him because I took a year off out of high school, and I watched Hennig play at North Hennepin College, and junior college was strong then. Hennig made 15 freaking solo tackles. The next day in I think it was the Post, Hatchet Hennig tackles North Hennepin.
Hatchet Hennig
tackles North Hennepin. So I was always going up to him and going, Hatchet Hennig.
Wow. So we went from the Axe and Mr. Perfect to the Cyclops and Hatchet.
Yeah.
So we kind of revised wrestling history.
Oh my God.
So many gimmicks in that family. I had no idea.
Seriously. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. The Axe is back, and the Axe is back to stay.
Yeah, he said that about 20 times every time he came in.
Remember that? Yeah. Yeah, that was Larry. And don't get me. Larry loved to hear it too. If you said that, Larry perked right up. He was your best friend. He really was.
So, John, I mean, with all of that history in Robbinsdale and all of the guys who went into the business and so forth, was that what made you decide to pursue your career in wrestling, or what exactly propelled you to get into that ring?
Well, I knew I knew, how you always got a plan in your heart, what you're going to do, but you really don't go around advertising it.
Sure.
I wanted to be a pro football player. Well, I got a year in with the New Jersey Generals in the USFL, and that was as high as I got. And I knew I wanted to be a pro wrestler if pro football didn't pan out, which of course it didn't. And so with all the connections and mainly getting out to Brad Ranga's camp in '84, I watched Kurt, Kurt had his son Joe, I think in '81. And so I watched Kurt, and he'd stop by and go and see him at the Robbinsdale Municipal Bar and be calling. And I got all excited about it even before I went to camp. I knew that this is what I want to do.
Were you a wrestling fan growing up as a kid?
I was an AWA fan. Yeah, I was. You guys know the Crusher.
Sure.
On and on. But to me, the Crusher was probably, And me and Kurt, what was funny was me and Kurt would go to our 8th, 9th grade lockers in the morning at the junior high. And if somebody like Billy Superstar Graham did an interview that Sunday, Monday morning, we were going, Billy Superstar Graham, baby, Mae West looks best on Superstar. And then next thing you know, me and Henning are talking like that all day. Yes, I understand just fine, perfectly. Yes, and that's what we did. I think everybody else was doing it at the same time.
You know what, John, that's so typical. So many people started as wrestling fans, imitating their favorite guys or whatever it may have been, or, going through the moves, body slamming somebody on a mattress in the basement or whatever. I had a question because you mentioned Brad Ringens as one of your trainers. And of course, Brad is phenomenal.
Yes.
Another guy that I believe had something to do with your training was Eddie Sharkey. Is that not correct?
Yeah, Eddie did. He did. I met him over on Broadway, North Minneapolis, and he had a wrestling room over there that he trained guys at. And I ended up drifting over there the summer of '84. And God, John, thank you so much for coming. John, did you bring any money? God, what a nice shirt, John. Well, now that you mentioned, I think we will go out to Brad's. Yes. And of course, Eddie would be right there with his hand out going, God, John. Oh, thank you so much for coming. I'm like, easy,
my God.
Easy, Eddie. You can cancel out. No, but of course I loved them. You can't hit. These are your greatest characters. I just loved it.
Talking about Eddie Sharkey, I and the impression that you just did of Eddie, phenomenal. I don't know how many times there would be, we'd be running the shows at Roper's or George's and Fridley, and Eddie at the end of the night.
Yeah.
Oh, boys, the poster money didn't come in.
It's Eddie, and he was hard to find sometimes too.
No kidding.
But he was always there when the money was getting distributed.
Isn't that something?
It is amazing. Yeah.
It just turned out that way, that he just like a magnet.
And I would have liked to have been a fly on the wall listening to him and Brad split up the camp money. Can you imagine that? You're a straight shooting Brad, and I don't mean, we don't mean that in any way. Of course, Eddie a lot better than me, man. All you guys do. And just what a great guy. I just,
Eddie is legendary. And I've said this so many times, and I mean it from a complimentary standpoint. One of the biggest carnies in the history of the business, but that's what's lovable about Eddie Sharkey. I mean, you knew what you were going to get with Eddie.
Oh, God, he might as well be running a Ferris wheel, God. And he's like, last time I seen Sharkey, I think it was at the gathering, I said, Eddie, I was telling somebody, like, Eddie shot up Verne's office, and these guys like, what? I said, I grabbed him. I says, Eddie, did you shoot up Verne's office? He goes, oh, God, yes. A Canadian Colt in the West End. Oh, God, yes. And he named the pistol like that. A guy can't make that up, can he? Right?
Oh, my God.
9mm. Little handle, little heavy on the handle, but God, that shot nice.
Oh, the first time I talked about that in public, I thought, oh my God, do I want to bring this up? And Eddie was just over it. It's like he just won an Academy Award. He stood up and started taking a bow, and right, I shot up the office.
The guy was, and I don't know what year he did that. I'm sure it was something over like him being a ref and not being a wrestler,
actually,
what was it, man?
Well, there is a story about that, and I don't know all the details. This would have been about 64, 65.
Sounds
and
right.
Eddie at the time was married to Princess Little Cloud. Dixie Jordan, and I believe there was some issue with Verne booking or not booking her or something, and Eddie didn't take kindly to it, and I think instead of Verne up on the phone and calling him a name, he decided to go down to the office with a 9mm.
Oh,
So, horse apiece.
Canadian Mountie gun, man.
Talk about how you first actually got into the AWA itself. Did you contact Verne? Did he know about you? Did Brad set you up? How did that happen?
Went to Brad's camp through Kurt Henning via Eddie, but Brad had his first camp technically in October '84, and it was 30 days, and this was when it was still tough. Me, Rob Ricksteiner, a couple other guys, and we went full steam. It was no joke. Well, here the whole time, I knew my father-in-law had been best friends with Verne Gagne, but I wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, so I didn't even say nothing. I didn't even want a relay message to use him as a get me in type deal. I didn't. I just went to camp. I didn't say a word. And then one day at the end of camp, Greg came by at about the 30th day, so it was probably Thanksgiving '84 type thing. We're all standing there in our sweaty stuff, and Greg's showing us how to do a drop kick, and actually very nice, very very kind and gracious. And then all of a sudden Verne walks in, and Verne comes in, and Verne started with his stuff like, "You're lucky you're here, huh?" Stuff like that. And then out of nowhere, I said, "Hey, Verne, I think you might know my father-in-law." And he said, "Well, who's that?" I said, "Bud, B-U-D, Elson, E-L-S-E-N. And he goes, "Huh?" He goes, "Hold it now. There's two Bud Elsons. Which one are you talking about?" I said, "I'm talking about Joe Elson, my father-in-law." His jaw almost dropped. And he just couldn't say enough kind of words. Verne looked at me and said, "You're married to his daughter?" And my wife, she's a little sweet bookworm, the opposite of me, And he said, "Listen, you treat her good. Those are salt of the earth people." And I never forgot that he said that to me. And then I'll never forget, Greg pulled me to the side and he said, "This is pre-Eddie Mansfield stuff, right?" Sure. So it was heavy kayfabe, and Greg says to me, "Listen, John, nobody knows the secrets of our trade. If we find out you're telling anybody, you'll be fired immediately, and we'll deny anything you said." That's what Greg said to me.
Wow.
So I took it serious, Not really. I was out drunk with Henning the next night telling everybody. "Hey, I got secrets."
Yeah.
So, did you know? Oh, my mouth was, and it was just so much fun. But that's how I got in. And then years later, here, not too much, I started thinking about it. No matter what I did, how many times I no-showed, and this and that, Verne never fired me. And you know what? Hello, Joe Elson, and I didn't try to. I was just, you know how it is. You're on the verge of not making enough money, you quit, you get back. And it was just, and of course, I had my demons. I would go out there and get drunk and no show, and I held it together pretty good, but definitely.
It's interesting, and I want to thank you because when you said that 30 years ago was Verne pulled you to the side and said, "You're lucky to be here."
Yeah.
He said the same thing to me in '87. I think he said the same thing to Hulk Hogan. So you might have been a trendsetter, John. Way back then, we were all lucky to be there.
By the way, you can include me in that group as well. I was lucky that Verne gave me the job to do his TV project.
Yeah. And every time I think of you, Joe, I think of that big camera in front of your head.
Well,
So-
anything to block this face.
Yeah. I mean, a name like Polish Joe, come on. Dude, I don't need to look at the guy. Just tell me about him.
Just a quick thing about kayfabe. So I remember when I first started, and we had interview days, like it was either a Tuesday or a Wednesday. So you'd have all of the boys come in.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, I remember Verne like whispering to some of the boys, hey, you got to separate, basically baby faces.
Yeah.
You go here, heels, you go there. And here I am just thinking, seriously, by the end of the very first day of doing interviews, there's the commingling and everything. And
yeah.
And every once in a while, I'd just sneak a peek over at Verne, and I swear that he was like looking at me, like thinking, okay, I got to keep an eye on this guy.
Yeah.
Don't be breaking kayfabe. It's like, come on, Verne.
Well, and we were all like, we all got our stories on that Verne like that. But I'll tell you what, the one thing I always go back to is we all know that was good for that business. He was the last guy to do it. He was a hard ass on that. And it's so refreshing even to talk about a guy like that. It really is. As big as, God bless his heart, his ego was sometimes. He was so good for the business. He was the business when we were growing up, right?
John, I'm thinking of what Bobby Heenan used to say about Verne. What people ask him, what was he? And Bobby said, if you did your job, if you showed up on time, if you listened,
he's close.
Was what he wanted. That was it.
He's close. You're making it hard, you guys, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of making things, running into brick walls, I want to fast forward here. You and I talked a little bit in Waterloo.
Yeah,
it was a ringside photographer back in the 80s.
Yeah,
and you were wrestling. I believe it was Tom Zenk.
Yes,
and ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you, if you have ever heard the sound of a face and an eye in contact with a steel ring pole at about 100 miles an hour, I've never seen anything like it in my life.
Yeah.
The injury, I just remember seeing you hit the ring post and hearing that noise. Tell me about that a little bit.
God, here I am, greener and grass. I got my New Jersey Generals, football jersey on at the Civic Center, and I'm excited. I got my wife in the back with a couple buddies and having fun, but I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I'm so nervous, my knees are shaking. To get out there in front of all that people. It didn't come natural. Most people think it does, but it don't. And here I am wrestling Tom, and Tom had some experience, And what happened was I'm going to do I run to do a shoulder block into his gut, and he's in the turnbuckle standing up, and he moves, and I'm going to do something where I get hung up. Well, the steel pole, a round steel pole, and it had those little U things on it for clips.
Yes.
One of them is sticking straight out. I hit it as hard. I tell people that's the hardest I've ever been hit by far on planet Earth. And I hit it. My face swelled up, and it's like you go into some kind of shock. It really don't hurt. It just happened, and now you're moving on. But it was, oh God. And you're so right, Mick. It was as hard as what it sounded.
Oh my God. And and I remember distinctly everybody about ringside. It wasn't that they gasped. They just kind of froze. They did not believe that a human being could survive that kind of impact. I mean, man, you went right in there. There were no hands up. You went face first. And what happened? Did you have an eye issue after that or something? Was that the injury?
No, but it did swell up and close my eye. But it just swelled. It was mainly a cheek. I didn't break nothing. I didn't even go to the doctor. But it swelled up so fast that I just kept going, and it was. I wish it could have been main event with Hulk Hogan, but it wasn't. It was second match with Tom Zenk at the Civic Center, and the match didn't mean nothing. But if at least you're going to do that to yourself, do it on a big match, John. You know.
Well, as much pain, that happened to you in that incident, I think I feel equally as bad for that ring post because you are not a small human being, John.
No, and that there's that happened out outside the Leaning Post Bar, the Robbinsdale Municipal, Gordon's. That's right. Maybe I did do it like 10 times. I can't remember. No, but yeah.
There were a lot of sidewalks, John, that had an extra crack in them. I think over the years, from the impact of your noggin, I think you actually created your own Hollywood Walk of Fame sometimes with your hands in cement, and you didn't really do.
Well, and what I'll never forget, I'm walking in the backstage in there. So I got packed. Everybody knows I'm not hurt that bad because I'm still walking and talking, but I'm just saying the F word and this and that.
Sure.
Kurt Hennig walks by. You know what he says to me? Jean-Claude Keeley. Like a Claude, I said, thanks, Kurt. Jean-Claude Keeley me, Anyways, yeah.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Just slightly off script, but the injury brings up a story that I had heard about you.
Yeah.
When you were with the New Jersey Generals and you either had a leg brace on or a cast on or something, and as the story was told to me by somebody who played football with Hawk up at where they play up in Moorhead or something like that. Anyway, that you were at a bar and some guy just decides to cold cock you. You end up chasing the guy down, managed to get your finger into his mouth, and you basically ripped his cheek.
Oh, geez. Well, I think Mick knows that one. That was actually, and we were at Grandma B's in a cast, and Tommy Ferrara, a good friend of Eddie's, ended up being a nice guy in that. But Tommy, a little Italian guy with a chip on his shoulder, and a nice guy, of course. But I didn't know him, and he did. I stood up in a cast, and he got me. But then the crap hit the fan. Everybody starts punching everybody, and I'm trying to get to this guy. I'm like, here's John again. My face is like this. And I'm going, get that. And I got my hands on him, and I did. Well, we were doing because it was like a lawnmower. And it still gives me the creeps. It was that bad. I remember in his cheek, and honest to God, I if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't have done it, but I did. But and Eddie was always a little, I'd go, Eddie, that guy's a piece of shit. And Eddie go, oh, Tom's a tough kid. Tom's a nice guy. I'm going like, Eddie, stop. He cold cocked me, So Eddie just didn't see that side, but he didn't need no bad. Eddie just wanted to keep the peace,
Well, you said that you feel bad about it. I'm guessing that Tommy probably felt a little bad about it.
That's funny how I feel that way, guys.
I knew the story, John. I knew that it happened, but I did not know that it was Tommy Ferrara. No kidding.
Yeah, I asked Eddie about it. Yeah, it sure was. And then there was another guy at the Hill Bar in Hamel, and that was another one. But and what's crazy is I am not like that, man. I'm the happiest drunk there is. But yeah, the main thing is there is a lot of stories, and of course, if I think the hardest I ever laughed, and as you guys too, anytime we're on the road, you guys included, you guys, when you're on the road going to these deals, is it any more fun than sitting there with your buddies?
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Greatest,
Chris?
Yeah.
I mean, nothing better. And I got to tell you one. Me and Henning started talking about the Munsters, right? The Munsters, Herman, Lily.
Yeah.
And we're watching this, and we're talking about this episode of the Munsters where Herman turned into a hippie. And the girl's dancing with him, and Herman's got the beads on, and the music stops, and she starts going, Mr. Munster, the music has stopped. You can quit dancing now. And Herman just keeps dancing. She says, Mr. Munster, the music has stopped. And he goes, don't freak now, baby. I'm too far out. So what a great line, right? Don't freak now, guys. I'm too far out.
That is fantastic.
Oh my God. So before, like, you were talking about some of the, some of the wrestlers that you admired kind of growing up. Like,
yeah,
who were your role models and kind of the guys that you look up to when you were a fan before you got into the business?
Before I got into business, I think my memory goes back to when superstar Billy Graham would come in and do these, whatever deal he had with Verne, because we would just be all over it. We'd be, and then Kurt told me that he went to Duluth with them when he was like in 9th or 10th grade. And I'm going, you're going to Duluth, with superstar Billy Graham? Well, Henning gets back. I says, how was the ride? He goes, it was so great. And then Kurt, and I guess Billy Graham was going, Curtis Michael, a man needs his pastries. And he's eating like rolls, the exact opposite what you think Billy Graham would be, It said a man needs his pastries. So we always said that too. But I think that, but I'm like you guys, how can you beat the Crusher? How can you beat, them top guys, Mad Dog? I mean, those guys were incredible talents. And
I know Chris has a little follow-up to that, but you mentioned the talent, and you were lucky enough, John, to come in, even though you were mid to late 80s, there was still that residual AWA talent.
Yeah.
Still there before the wheels started to fall off a little bit.
Yeah.
You were really
said.
Fortunate.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I agree. I did get the last of the old timers and the beginning of the new guys. And if there was a pivotal point, I don't know if you guys thought about this or agree, but it was probably the Road Warriors, because Mike and Joe went in. They wanted them to work with the Crusher. Well, they didn't sell it. They didn't do nothing. And the Crusher came back in the locker room. He did not like the young muscle guys. You know what I mean? And not that made him a bad guy. He wasn't. He just had a hard time adapting the way we have a hard time adapting now to these new guys.
Exactly. So interesting point about Crusher. Was it more that the times were changing, or was he just pissed off that the guys weren't doing their job by not selling for him? I heard stories that, the roadies wouldn't sell for him and Bruiser and guys like this. So was he coming at it from that standpoint, or more, I don't want to give up my standpoint?
I think you said it all there, Mick. I think you said it all right there. And, some of the stuff was so outdated, the big punch. I mean, but then I worked with the Crusher a couple of times and Mad Dog a couple of times, and I would just sell their stuff. I wanted to have a good match always, and then I wanted to get on the road in the 85 Lincoln. I sold Henny, but you're right. It was even hard to watch them guys. And the only guy that I seen where it didn't rattle him at all was the Baron. The Baron never changed, never got this way, that way. He was that great a dude and still is. That's right? I'm sure you guys agree. And I don't know why the Crush and I think he started to feel kind of shorter and smaller. Yeah. And what are you going to do? You got to, and you can't stop change. And he found that out too, the way we find it out now.
That's such a great point, John, because I remember with Crusher specifically. You know, his last good run, I think, it brought him in for a feud with Jerry Blackwell.
Yeah.
You know, and they were going back and forth, but by the time he started teaming up with Baron, and they were put over as the tag team champs for a while.
Yeah.
Well, now not only did the business change, but the audience changed. You had a Road Warrior audience now, and Crusher had been popular for 30 years, but there was no credibility anymore.
That's right.
Year-old guy beating up on Hawk and Animal.
Oh, thank you. You know, exactly, Mick. And Mick, your first was 87, Mick? Was your first year 87, 86?
In doing the thing?
Yeah, I mean, what was the first year you showed up with Verne?
I started with Verne doing the announcing in 87, but I mean, I hanging around for years before that. But yeah, 87. So
okay, so yeah, that's about what I thought.
Yeah, by that time, Crusher, I mean, it wasn't working anymore.
It was bad. It was bad. And one thing that I didn't realize, remember ESPN, right, with Verne?
Yeah.
I just thought it was another show that was going to get dusted under the table. No big deal. Well, it turns out, man, the Vince mentioned, I seen you on ESPN when I got hired for him. Next thing I know, that ESPN meant a lot, right? And I didn't think it meant jack squat, but it did.
That's Joe's wheelhouse.
It was it?
ESPN kept the AWA alive.
Yeah.
The AWA would have extended longer than it did if ESPN would have given Verne another contract. But I mean, that was Verne's bread and butter. He was making a ton of money, John. I mean, you know, the house shows were squat syndication. Verne was paying station still to air the show in some markets. Verne did not pay attention to All-Star Wrestling. And he brought up about how guys, or Vince said that he saw you on ESPN. I brought it up on a previous podcast about how.
Yeah, I think it was last week that we talked about that, just how important that TV deal was, to the talent and the fact that like you say, John, if it wasn't for that, like that was the springboard for you to really take that next step and go to New York.
Yeah, it really was, but you didn't even know it at the time. And that comes straight from the semi-controversial, always well-dressed Chris Tubbs. I don't know why I like saying that. Have I been dropped on my head or something? Anyways, I'll tell you which ones I remember the most, you guys. I don't know about how you are, but those ESPNs at the Showboat with Brody, we had about 3 of them in a row where then me and Frank got kicked out of the Showboat. We got kicked out of ESPN because we hit the job guys in the head with mops, and there was mop water on a guy in the audience. It was out of hand. And then I went to the Showboat bar after the matches, and there's this girl I know from Robbinsdale, Peppy, big family. She's there with her dad. Frank comes by and just looks at her like this. And this girl started crying by Frank looking at her. I'm going like, and she went away, and I went with her down to the end of the bar. She's got tears coming down her eyes. She goes, this guy made me cry. I'm going like, Frank, what was that about? You're married, brother. I'm like, Frank, she's from Robbinsdale. She just, so, but that's a true story. Brody's the only guy I know that stared at someone to make him cry. Just never met him, just staring at their eyes.
I want to go back to this mop business.
Say mop water there. I figured that was a drink at the bar called mop water.
You guys are the experts. This guy was a black guy, and I remember he was maybe 6'1", 6'2", kind of out of shape, but not too bad. And he's with him, and we go down the aisle from the locker room. Brody grabs the bucket. I'm like, Frank's off to the races. I better grab something. So now I grab the mop. We get in the ring, and the job guys are just going, oh, yeah. They don't know what's coming. I take this big, heavy mop by the handle, and it's got the most putrid swamp water on it you ever smelled. I do a whirly twirl and whap this guy in the side of the head. And I'll never forget it. He went down to one knee and goes, and he froze for about 30 seconds like that. The fans started clearing out. It looked like, the wave. And it was incredible. And we got kicked out. Greg comes to us. He goes, "Good job, John." I said, "What?" He goes, you guys are kicked off. You're kicked out of ESPN. You're kicked out of the Showboat, I mean. I said, okay. I said, "Do you want me to tell Frank? I noticed you ain't going to Frank." Great. Huh.
So the behind the scenes story, it was not ESPN. It was not the Showboat that were pissed. It was Verne and Greg because it wasn't wrestling the way that they wanted it. And I remember telling Greg, I go, "Well, what the hell do you expect? You've got Brody to begin with, and then you got Johnny, who is his protege at the time."
Yeah.
I mean, what do you expect?
Do you remember that, Joe?
I was in the truck. I remember that.
Good. I'm glad I got somebody to verify that. I'm like
in the studio on Monday morning. I remember after that, Greg came in. I had the 1-inch tapes. Monday morning, I put them up and figure out the times on the matches and so forth. And Greg walks in, and I was timing that particular match.
Wow.
And Greg, he goes, "Yeah, those sons of bitches. They, we got to teach them a lesson. We want wrestling here."
That sounds like Greg.
Are you fucking kidding me? That was
you're gonna teach them a lesson.
Well, and what was funny about Greg, when we do a tag team or whatever, and Greg's in there, Brody's one of the things Frank did in the ring was he'd have a guy throw him into the turnbuckle. And then Frank would yell out. Now this, I've never told this, but this is true. This is what he does. He'd have a guy throw him into the turnbuckle. I'd be on and Frank would yell out to the guy. So he yells to Greg after he throws him in the turnbuckle. And Frank would yell out, "Come get some." In other words, "Come on, get some, start beating the shit out of me," right?
Oh.
Well, what do you think's going to happen? The boot comes up. And the guy, and I remember Greg running full steam thinking, I'm going to get some. I'm going to get some. And Frank sticks that boot up and Greg just waffled. He kind of bent over like a folding table. And so Greg, the next week, of course, in the locker room was, "Come get some, Greg." He's like, "You've got a drinking problem," he says.
Go ahead, Chris. So, you talk about Brody, and I mean, it's obvious that in your character, you're the Barbarian. It was modeled after Brody, and for most of your career, if not all of it, if I'm not mistaken, you were a monster heel. Was it natural for you, and is that what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I think you guys. I just don't think anything else was in me. He just happened to be there when I met him in Japan in '85, and then people started dropping little seeds, and next thing you know, you're half Brody, half Road Warrior, and all I know is I wasn't a baby face. I wasn't go out there and say a bunch of articulate things, Nick Bockwinkel type stuff. So I didn't really have no other choice. I mean, I had guys tell me over the years that I graduated with, they says, "You are a true barbarian." It's like, you are really, for real, a barbarian. You've been that way since you've been in 9th grade. But the main thing is, the barking and the style. Yeah, I got that from Frank, and Frank gave me the okay on it, even when I wasn't with him yet, in '86. And then I remember Frank coming in the locker room in ESPN. I think we were somewhere east, Joe, and now I got to tell him, "I'm acting like you, Frank, in the ring." And I take that back. I really didn't get his okay till this night. And I said, Frank, I hope you're not mad at me or nothing like that, that I'm doing this, and it's exactly what I said. And he said, brother, you're a respectful guy, man. I remember Japan, a couple of years ago, and then he just got right on it. But the only way that you're going to get Frank Goodish's blessing is if you say something real, something humble, something forthright in his face. Otherwise, you're just going to be another pussy. And I knew at least to do that, and I did it, and it was great. We had a great relationship.
Well, I got to say that you did him well in terms of being Brody too. If I don't want to take anything away from what you accomplished.
Yeah.
But you and Brody as a tag team, one of my favorites because of the complete and total unpredictability of what the hell is going to happen in that ring. I enjoyed every minute watching it.
Thanks, Joe. No, you know what? I never really felt really that worthy, but I knew Frank was a ring general. When you're in the ring with Frank Goodish, he's the general. That's what everybody knows right away. I figured it out quick. And I forgot where I was going with that. What were we just talking about, Joe?
Well, I was just giving you credit for being Brody. I mean, phenomenal. In fact, just real quick, I remember, and I told you this at the AWA reunion pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
First time I'd seen you since
Joe.
That.
I remember that.
You walked into that control room that very first time.
Yeah.
I'm thinking in my head, holy shit, this is the largest human being I've ever seen in my life. I'm 6'3", 200 pounds. I mean, on the thin side. So I'm not short or anything, but I'm sitting there doing this. It's like, don't hurt me.
Yeah, and we were a little bit of a loaded cannon in them years too. You don't know if, you're going to chop a cameraman and just to rip his nipple off or something,
I can't, more than
Let me see, did your nipples still there, Joe? Okay, that's good.
Hold on, I might have to feel
Hawk never chopped it off, huh? Mike was known to get a few nipples in his career.
Well, the whole camera gimmick, I will tell you that I did actually approach Verne about being in the showboat, giving me a dummy camera on my shoulder like I'm doing and having me take a bump. I mean, I was 22 years old. I was
young and strong.
I mean, I was in really good shape. It's like, I can take a bump for it. Let me do it. No, kid.
That's great. But, just quick, I remember Hawk chopped Kurt so hard once. This is before Kurt got buff. And Kurt's, the left half of his nipple was bleeding. And I was just like, and Kurt's like, fucking Hawk, what the fuck is wrong with him? Fucker does that to me, I'm gonna do it to him back. I don't care. Kurt, he's all defensive now. It's just not like Hawk really tried to rip your nipple off, Kurt. Anyways, but here's the thing is, before I forget, you guys, make sure I tell you about the Brody contract, and I'll tell you about it.
Absolutely. And, on that great note, can you imagine how great Kurt would have been if he had a full nipple going on for the rest of his career? He would have been more than perfect.
Maybe that's why he kept saying you got two nipples for a dime. I don't know.
Oh my God. Okay. Before we wrap up the first part of this, John, kind of tell us what you got coming up, because you guys are going to be out in Los Angeles for Wrestlemania. I know that you got some things that you're going to be doing out there. I've got it on the scroll, but kind of tell us Chris. What you got. Yeah. Tell us what you got going on out there, and any way we can help to get the word out.
Well, thanks for bringing that. Thanks, you guys. Yeah, I ain't going to plug it super hard, but we, my buddy Justin got us hooked up in a comedy club in Pasadena 2 nights before. It's called the Ice House. And me and the Grappler, my longtime friend from 1985, one of the greatest guys you'll ever meet, you guys, Lynn Denton. He is the real deal. He's all heart. He's just a wonderful man. Anyways, and then the WrestleCon, which Justin got us a table, and we're just gonna hammer it out, sell merchandise, T-shirts, and just try to rock and roll. I'm looking to try to run into Bret Hart. I've been talking to him a little bit. And I'm trying to run into the Undertaker if that's possible. And we were pretty tight in the day, and he's called me once in 25 years. So I'm a little teed off. You know, the kid's done all right for himself, I guess. You know, he ain't John Nord, but let's face it. Who is?
Yeah, who is? You know
what?
Besides, you know, you're it. I love the mob story, John. And as we close out here, I've heard the expression the guy could put over a broomstick.
Yeah,
but I never heard of a guy putting over a shit-stained mop to the side of his head. So that was terrific. I appreciate that.
And fits right in with the rest of my poop stories I got. Which are several of them, and I don't know. I think we're going to keep it clean, guys. But yes, I just want, before this half closes up, you guys, I could do this for hours with you three dudes, man. I mean that. You know how we get, Chris Farley, we're going to wrestle around. We're going to be pals. We're going to be buddies. We're going to be amigos.
We'll see you next week, right, Chris?
Yeah, I guess. Fuck it. Yeah, we're coming back with part 2 next week.
Chris, you understand just fine, perfectly, brother. I'm going to be there. The man needs his pastries.